the fact. It's okay. Let's go.
Sorry, I'm awake.
I'm awake. Wake up.
Thank you so much for joining us. Speaking from the James E. Walker Library's podcast room, I am Pierce Torano.
And I'm Sam Jenkins.
We are going to talk about the material study of religion.
So what we've learned so far about the material study of religion, as David Morgan says in his book, The Thing About Religion, it really deals with objectification, which is when we place a name or a concept upon everything around us. Pierce, before we even recorded, you were talking about how really everything is material.
Yeah, anything can be, such as a feeling, a song, object. It can be a sight, a view, anything. As long as it's a thing, it's a thing.
And like even the word thing kind of puts us in a limbo state. We don't really have a noun definition for the word thing. That's kind of the point of it, is kind of a mystery. But what we do know is we have things in our lives. More specific names like clothing, hat, table. Right now we're using these microphones. These are all objects that have a relationship with us. And that relationship is what it's all about. That's what David Morgan calls the assemblage. I want to say it French because it's so French looking, but the assemblage, right? It's basically the group and the different actors in the group. So for instance, we are using the chairs, we're at the table, we're interacting in this, he calls it a constellation of components. And each of these actors or things, objects, including us, we are objects as well, have power or agency that they use to work and interact.
It makes a bigger picture. For example, table goes with chairs because chair goes with table. And that sense, the chairs itself are nodes that connect to one another. Our object for today is a deck of cards for a game called Hand and Foot.
Your particular box set, the company that made it really popular in America, apparently this couple lived there in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And it wasn't maybe called Hand and Foot back then, but they like developed the rules and everything and then made a game out of it. But it's kind of a mystery, huh? So what's the history of this game in your life?
So the history of this game is my granny, Sandra Torano, and she introduced it to my dad, my aunt's husband, who then introduced it to my aunt's husband's mom. Her name is Nellie. It's really sweet. But it went down to children's children, and so on. It's a long-running tradition, and it holds a special place. We would usually play this around family gatherings and, anytime we were together to just give an excuse. One of the things about Hand and Foot is you're not allowed to have a hand foot set until you leave the house, because if you want to play it somewhere else, then you have to go back to the person who has it.
That is so fascinating. Why did you decide to choose this for the object that you presented?
I really wanted to show this off because it has such an inherent value to me, because it's a game that isn't very common. It's very niche in that sense, but it's also very special because it connects me to my family more than I would have regardless. Even when you and I were playing the other day, they weren't necessarily in the room, but I could still remember times of holidays and times of togetherness where it connects me with them, you know?
I love that. Also, we spent the first really 2 units challenging what we've been used to calling religion. This is a great example of that same concept. It doesn't have any attachment to any what we would call religion or the groups of world religions that we have in our brains. But that's perfect because it exhibits all the qualities that seem to be inherent to the things that we do call religion. But even more importantly, it has something that's not a part of it and yet still feels close to it. And this is probably a great time to analyze the object.
Right. There's 6 different ways that David Morgan describes material object. It can be external, ritual, inherent, mimetic, instrumental, or aesthetic. Not necessarily in that order, but if you want to throw it in that way.
So why don't we just go one at a time? First one, external. This is the idea of some outworldliness giving it value. So if we think of, sacred texts and things like this in the religions that we're used to, these are presented as coming from the deity or coming from some outside source that has some powerful genesis, basically. And we talked about it, and even though we know, the company and they give us the story, we don't actually know the history of the game. Right. And we looked pretty far and wide, and we couldn't find it.
I mean, even in the handandfootgame.com, there's a history section where it describes, like, this came from Indonesia. Not exactly sure where in Indonesia. It has an unclear genesis, which adds more value to it.
Yes.
In the sense of, like, there is no clear answer, so it just popped into the universe one day, and boom.
It popped into the universe like golden tablets. Like it's just there. It's like, this is exactly what he's talking about with, we call this kind of thing a thing because it avoids or it eludes our ability to constrain it. So it's awesome. It's like this mystery game that kind of was given to us from the gods. Like it's just like there. So that's kind of, we decided to call it external power. So ritually, we could get into the fact that somewhere there's people pressing the cards or making the cards, or however the factory, if there's a, I don't know, hand and foot factory that makes it, you could go into the consumerism ritual thing like that. And that actually could do that.
Right.
I was more interested in how, because of you using it, your family using it, it gained importance.
Right. And there is like a ritualistic aspect into like shuffling. There's like 262 cards in this deck. And there's so much probability that can happen that it's almost asinine to think about all the different cards you could get.
Wow. Yeah. So that's cool, because this is exactly what we're talking about with ritual agency, is that it wasn't necessarily important before, but because of a ritual happening, it made it now important and it gave it power. And now this game does have a certain agency in a relationship to you and your family. When you guys see it, probably when you hear the words hand and foot together, you think about it, it's gained some holiness or sacredness into itself.
Because I've shared this knowledge with you, you're also a part of
it.
You're part of the constellation.
I'm in the hand and foot game.
That also has an instrumental effect where, because I was able to teach it to you, you're now able to play it with somebody else or potentially take that into your own account. We're going to play this over the summer.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Heck yeah.
In a different country, no less.
Exactly.
We're going to bring this. It's the mission. We're missionaries. We're hand and foot missionaries.
Right.
No, I love that. So going to the instrumental, that's great. It's really easy to skip over things like games, but that's why I love this whole topic. You know how much I love the material topic. It's just so cool. We're like bringing an extraordinary lens into the ordinary. I love it so much. Yeah, the instrumental agency of games in general, but specifically this game. Can you talk a little bit about what happens in the people playing the game? I really liked what you said the first time you played this.
Yeah, so Hand and Foot has that layer of strategy. It has that layer of what you want to do. It has that layer of what could possibly not happen. For example, when I was whooping you in that second round, you had just gotten out of your hand and gone into your foot. There was a lot of possibilities that could happen in there. Now, I wanted to cut you off because who knows what could have been in that foot, because next turn you could lay down all kinds of different things. It's allowing me to figure out what your strategy is and compare it to my strategy. I'm learning more about you. I'm learning more about how you play and how you interact with the world based on how you follow these rules.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's a really great example of this idea that Morgan writes about the focal point. It's almost like the login screen for a website. Like we're using Hand and Foot or any other game to both interact in an unseen space and a seen space. It's a beautiful marriage of ideology and materialism into one section. And so, yeah, without getting that deep, it is a nice way to hang out with your family or your friends or to pass time. That's very instrumental. That's the perfect idea for the agency of the object. But in another deeper way of instrumentalism, it is almost like a login screen to the metaphysical space. Like, we're not necessarily thinking that as I'm whooping you in the first round.
Whoa. That was because of technicality.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's great. Jumping back to inherent, I love the way that we're going down the tree. We don't know where it comes from, and then it has value because of the ritual placed into it. And then inherently, now it has importance to me, for example. I have not met your family, but it has inherent value in my life now because it has come from you. And for you, like, you didn't make up the game, and you weren't the first person to learn it, but you got it from whoever taught you the game. So now it has this inherent value coming down as well.
Right. That goes into a little bit of sacralization, like what makes a space or a thing or an object sacred. It gains inherent value by how much we put onto it. Same way that religion can be used. What makes up the church are the people.
Yeah, great. Oh, and what makes up the game table is the players.
Exactly.
Wow, I got buzzed. That's awesome.
Right.
So yeah, and the mimetic, we talked about, there are some mimetic features of this. A hand,
right.
A foot,
Right.
The characters on the cards, the numbers. Yeah, and they're there. They are for sure there. Last one is the aesthetic agency of it, which a lot of times we think about aesthetic as primarily visual aesthetic, but actually aesthetic just is the whole feeling, all of it, the colors, and also I just thought about the feeling of shuffling,
Right.
the feeling of passing out the cards, of like holding your hand, like all of it, the sound, it's all part of it. Yeah, it's very visually appealing with the the contrast colors, purple and no, you said not magenta because magenta doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
what would you call it again?
It's like fuchsia.
Fuchsia, that's right.
Let's go with quiche yellow. And
Also, is there a instruction manual?
yeah, it's at the very bottom. There's even like a little tag card where it's like inspected by so and so.
Because it's almost like you have the scriptures of hand and foot.
Yes, I do. It's the same thing as while the rules may have been written out and may have been remembered a certain way, it's still based on how you choose to practice it, like house rules, what we were talking about earlier.
Remember that one time where I took the card, and technically you're supposed to know for sure you can use the card before you take it, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. And luckily I could use it. And so that brings up questions of like, what would have happened? What are the repercussions of me sinning in card and hand and foot law, you know?
Well, that's the thing. You would have gotten negative 100 points.
Right.
You also would have made a sin. But
one more thing about the aesthetic before we move on. I love that you said about one of your relatives, how they held and touched the box while they were getting stressed about the game.
yeah, so that's my Aunt Kathy. So she is famous for being very, I'm going to word this very, very passionate about how she plays the games. So much so that she flipped a table over, which had a huge Monopoly set on it. The same way that when she was playing this game, there's a little tear in the corner of this box, which also adds a sense of aesthetic to it, where it's like this has gone through the ringer. You can also see little bits of ink and little bits of faded parts. Like this fuchsia isn't as bright and as lovely as it used to be. That's the thing. It's beaten up. It's well loved in that sense, to where it's gone down, it's passed to the family and so on. It adds to the effect of the game.
Yeah, it has it's like a record of the user. Mm-hmm. It's so cool. And like you'll always, whenever you pass this on to whoever you're going to pass it on to, what happened to this part? Oh, that was Aunt Kathy. Even if they never meet them now, they have Aunt Kathy in this box.
Right.
It's so cool.
It also is another way of looking at it instrumentally, where I'm telling you the story, and so you know more about me and more about my background.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. It adds more placement.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a great place to jump into the strengths and limits, or strengths and weaknesses. Tell us a little bit about the strengths.
So the strengths, we can see parallels to common everyday items. For example, this is a huge deck of cards, but we're imposing a set of rules based on what we've been told and house rules. And so it adds a sense of agency in the sense that it's an everyday item, but we're using it in a certain way. There's also the discovery of expressions through diverse perspective. Now, you talked to me about the other day about how material culture can be relevant and universal. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Like you said, our first 2 points was that you can use material study of religion and has the parallels over into the materials themselves, the objects themselves. And the fact that we can always be open to different traditions through the discovery of how they're using objects. There's how does each people use objects? And then that's the diversity. But the fact that everyone does is its own category, and seeing the fact that everyone does is a broader topic.
Right.
And everyone can use everything. Yeah, there's a lot there. But those are the strengths of the material study of religion. But there are some limits too. There's some weaknesses. They're kind of almost the flip side of those ones. Like the first one is there's a potential to, when you're studying the material aspects, specifically of beliefs or religious practices, there is a temptation to, once you've learned how that material operates, to then see it only as a metaphor for the belief. For example, in hand and foot, you can use it, and one of the cool things about it is you can be having a strategy game going on. But if someone was studying us playing, they might overuse that and say like, hand and foot is used for strategy. Well, okay, you're missing a lot of the other parts of it. It's not just used for strategy. It's just one of the things. So I would say that's a weakness. Is there's a potential that when you're using it to study, you look past the material aspects of it and only at the ideological aspects of it, whereas the material aspects are really beautiful, the colors and the shuffling and the sounds. You don't want to miss those just for the study. The second aspect of weakness is you don't want to accidentally delete culture. We said you're deleting culture. Because you're just using it to generalize. We talked about how it's so beautiful that everyone uses materials all around the world, and despite tradition, everyone's using material.
Mm-hmm. What it represents to me could be different to what it represents to you. For example, even though I know what your necklace is, it's a piece of amethyst, but I may not know that it represents mindfulness or it represents calmness and so on. It can mean a completely different thing to me.
Yeah, totally. So then that would be the limit. And so you just want to take every single case by case basis, and then you can still use what we've learned in material study of religion, but just you don't want to take shortcuts in that way and delete culture. And the last one, you said something really great. The material study can be limiting based on accessibility.
Yeah, we can think about the box itself. So this hand and foot box. You didn't know about this game until I brought it or I told you about it. In the same lens, we can see that maybe not everyone has representation in different areas. For example, in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, at MTSU, there's a bajillion churches, but there's only like one Buddhist temple.
Right.
What's around you?
Yeah.
There's so much out there.
Well, I am stoked about stuff.
Yeah.
And I have loved doing this study with you. So thank you so much.
But of course. And you can look forward to getting whooped in round 3 and 4.
Oh, we'll see. We will see. But also thank you for listening to our conversation about material study of religion.
I've been Pierce Torano.
And I am Sam Jenkins. We hope you have a good one.
Have a good day.